Oh, welcome, everybody. This is the Edgewalker Cafe on August 26, 2021. And we're very excited today about having our longtime Edgewalker community member, Lewis Griggs, as our guest and storyteller today. So the agenda today will be, Lewis has three primary stories he wants to share with us. And so there'll be a storytelling time where he takes about 10 minutes to tell the story. We'll do 5 minutes of Q&A, any comments, any questions, go back to the next story, and then have 5 more minutes of questions and answers. One last story for 10 minutes, and then one last Q&A. And then we'll do some wonderful wrap up with music from my husband, Ellis Ralph. So as we begin today, I want to invite you into the sacred space that is there whenever two or more are gathered. And to take a moment to just center, being totally present in our bodies, but knowing, as Lewis will help us really understand, that we are so much more than our bodies. And knowing that the ultimate edge walking is the walk between life and death and the illusion of death. And so take a moment to just imagine yourself walking back and forth between those two worlds, just with ease and grace, with lots of light, totally in the presence of love, walking back and forth between these two worlds, just basking in the openness of that doorway. And we'll take a breath together as we begin, breathing in, inhaling, and exhaling. And we begin. So it's my great pleasure to welcome my friend, Lewis Brown Griggs. I can't even remember how long we've known each other, Lewis. It's just decades. And a wonderful journey of spiritual friendship. And I'm so looking forward to having you share with us today. Just for everyone's information, Lewis is really the pioneer in all the diversity, corporate diversity work that has been going on for decades. And he developed wonderful training programs that we used when I worked at Honeywell. I don't know if you know that, Lewis, but that's where I first heard of you. Never having a clue at that point that you were also on this spiritual journey. And so Lewis is recognized as this incredible global expert on diversity and inclusion. And at the same time, he was also becoming an expert on workplace spirituality and developing various kinds of tools and resources for, particularly in companies, for people doing work on workplace spirituality. And so he continues to do work in both of these domains, but mostly he's living and loving life. And so, Lewis, I turn it over to you now for your first story, the story you call Conversations with God.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody, unless there's anybody here in Europe. But otherwise, we're all here.
There is.
All right.
There is.
Good day. That's right, June. I remember hearing you before. Good day, then.
I'm in India, so it's late in the evening.
That's right.
And
So now
I'm in Switzerland, so.
Thank you. Now you just switched me to me being full screen to myself, which of course is no way to stay connected with all of you. So how do I get back?
I will unswitch you so that it just, if anyone wants to have Lewis as full screen, what you do is pin him. You'll see when you click on his profile, the picture, then to the right there are 3 dots, and you can pin him, not physically.
as speaker view. So I'm back on gallery view, so I get to look at all of you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was a really nice introduction, Judy. And I think it's been about 30 years, 30, 35, because I've been doing this work for 40 years. And there came a time when a few of us were trying to do spirit in the workplace conferences, and we did a few, but they weren't large enough to get corporate leaders' consciousness ready to connect spirituality with all the other leadership skills. And we're making progress, but we're not there yet. In fact, we just had evidence that we're not totally there yet, because I couldn't be in total spirit energy and simultaneously make the technology here on Earth work in this room. And so the connection between being in pure spirit and being in present is what we're all about. So I'm going to share with you first how I even began to be conscious of it. And I'm going to start by saying I was raised in a very sort of upper class, privileged environment and privately educated, and had just graduated from Amherst College, spent a couple years in DC in politics, and 2 more years in a startup company, and 4 more years in public TV in Boston, and then in San Francisco, when what I'm now going to describe happened. Because after all those experiences and my upbringing, I really didn't know yet what I was going to do when I grow up. And so there came a day on March 11, 77, right after I moved here to the San Francisco Bay Area, when I totaled my automobile, and my spirit, as we call it, or soul, they both exist, but I don't know where to draw the line between them. My soul left my body, and instead of watching the rest of the accident, like many people are able to do, I was flown high speed through what we call the tunnel, all the way to the end of the tunnel. And when I came out, I was in nothing but extreme pure white light. And before I heard the voice talk to me, my experience was that I must be in the source. I don't know what else to call it. Source of all energy, light, love, which we all come, and of which we are all one. And I was in the presence of all knowledge. It doesn't mean I had it all. It means it was all known. And then I heard a voice, and not everybody does. They have books called Conversations with God, so I'm not willing to use those words. And we all hear whatever voice we need to hear, by the way. If we hear a voice, it's in whatever language or gender we need. So I got this voice, sounding like mine, I guess, said, clarified for me, Lewis, you were called here to have this conversation and to be sent back because you're not doing your work. And that's sometimes what we all wonder, right? What's our work? And so I said, well, take me, I'm yours, I surrender, I'll do your work. And the voice I got back, and that was because I was raised as a Christian Episcopalian, thinking that now maybe my work was to teach all this of you who don't get it, God's words or something, right? And I, of course, was told, no, Lewis, that's not what you're here for. What is it that keeps you from doing all you're capable of doing and being all you're capable of being? Well, the way I'd been raised, I could do whatever I wanted, but I had never really thought about what is this about being all I'm capable of being. And the closest answer I can come up with, I'm giving a very short version of a TED Talk I did, if you want to go listen to it, called The Gift of Near Death. But my answer was, well, it must have had something to do with how I was raised, which is why I told you in the beginning how I was raised. And that my parents did say we are all one under God. But with that upbringing and such privilege, they said, but here on earth, in this place, you have more than anybody else. So noblesse oblige, you have to give back. Now that makes some sense. However, what came with it was a little class cultural righteousness, which is, yes, we're all one under God, but here I'm better than most others. Well, I didn't like that. And nor did I find it to be true. So I never got arrogant about this upbringing. I just noticed, and I'm still in white light trying to answer this question, okay? And what I came up with was, oh, I never knew how to do any of the bridging to relate to anybody different than me. Because in this culture, everybody else had needed to learn to do the bridging themselves to communicate with people like me. 14 generations, straight white Anglo, all Anglo, not other white. That's a lot of righteousness, 14 generations, right? To make sure you're sleeping with an all Anglo. 14 generations since the Mayflower. And so when I said, I don't know how to do any of the bridging, I know we're all one under God, but I don't know how to communicate with anybody different than me. They all had to learn to do it with people like me. So just like best sound and the best words in the movie Amadeus, when Lord said, that's it, when he heard the right note, this voice of God said, well, that's it, Louis, that's your work. At which point I went right back down this tunnel, high speed. I remember coming into my body, literally like those tight rubber gloves that surgeons have to wear, not the blue ones in the kitchen we don't wear, but the really tight ones, until all this white light left me and I'm in a totaled automobile and I walked out with no damage whatsoever to my body. And the ambulance arrived and I said, it's no problem. I'm fine. And my life started to change. And after I make just one more sentence, I'll listen to questions. The first thing I noticed was that doors started to open that I had nothing to do with. I was used to knocking over any door I wanted. Now I noticed doors open and I felt I was called to move through those doors and to see what I might learn. That's an entirely different way of living and relating. And I started to notice differences, like I was in a business with Japanese pharmaceutical executives trying to do business with the genetic engineering company I had started to raise money for. And I realized they had all the power in the meeting. I had none because I didn't know how to communicate with them. And they were all speaking English as well as Japanese. So when this first example came before me, I went home and told my global wife, you won't believe what happened today. I had this meeting and it was the first time in my life I actually had experienced so deeply that instead of accepting what I've already told you, that they all did it to communicate with me, I realized it was a deep weakness of mine that I needed to work on. And when I told my global wife, she said, you didn't know that yet? And quote unquote, she said, we are going to start the first diversity training company in the United States to teach straight white male executives who don't get it, how to get it. And you, Louis, are it. And I said, how can I be it? I'm the problem. And she said, that's how. And that's what started all the last 40 years of cultural diversity training, global and domestic, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, old, young, straight, gay, whatever we are, all the diversity we each bring, even all of us right now. So that's the short version of that entire experience. So when you hear how different the other two are, you'll understand why we thought, are there any questions you have now about that one? Anything?
Everyone is
not, I can-
muted, so you need to unmute yourself. Questions or comments, and there may be people on this call that also have had near-death experiences. And
Yeah,
please join the conversation.
yeah. And if no questions, no problem. I can not only talk forever like I have for 40 years, I can tell you more about that and I can move to the second. Okay.
Well, Shakri just sent you love. He put a little heart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As some of you know, these experiences are literally life-changing. And you'll appreciate it when I tell you that when Discovery Channel put me on with a couple of others, we were so proud. This literally was about 20 years ago. We were so proud. It was the first time in the country was going to talk more openly about these experiences. And when we watched, we were really irritated that they did not show our examples in a way that would give us any pride. They debunked them. They brought on scientists and doctors who said, oh, we think this experience never happened. We can just electronically and or chemically recreate similar feelings. And you know what, we who were on it, we were so angry, figuring, what are we going to do about it? And we finally realized, another learning for all of us, you're going to love this answer, is, you know what? Science doesn't yet know how to prove that these things really happened, especially if memory, excuse me, I thought memory was in the brain, which was in the body, which was in the totaled automobile. So how did I have perfect memory in the light at our source? The conversation with yourself? And we suddenly realized, you know what? So what if science can't prove it yet? And even so what if it never happened and we imagined it? Because guess what? If that's true, so what? It totally changed our life forever. Because every moment since then, I'm able to see the soul and spirit and everyone else try to contribute in the bridging, that's called relationship, and be as authentically as ever I'm able to be, instead of trying to do to run or lead this conversation. Life-changing. June, question.
Or it isn't a question, it's a comment, I think. Because I think there have been, I mean, I've been a member of the Alistair Hardy research, and I mean, there has been an attempt with people like that group to do scientific research. I'm not convinced by it myself. And it's interesting you say that quite often people say it's simply a product of the imagination. John Taverner, who's a friend of mine, a musician, and was a visionary, of course, himself, said, well, of course, the imagination was given for us precisely to have those experiences. So why is it surprising?
Exactly.
That's its purpose. But
Exactly.
I think to go back to Judy's, groundbreaking work on Edgewalkers, the society will take an awful lot of steps actually to preserve its prevailing ways of knowing, which is what I call them. I mean,
Right.
if in England, on the BBC, for example, there was a very, very beautiful account of someone who'd been on a ventilator during the COVID thing. And people are supposed to feel nothing on a ventilator. He actually had a faith in himself. And all the time he had a vision of being on a small boat with Jesus beside him, floating along on a complex sea. And he shared this very movingly on one of the programs on the BBC. And it was remarkable that as it flew back into the main program, what they said was, well, of course, the drugs will do a lot of things. So that the thing was completely dismissed. And what happens on some of our news programs, where they will cover a near-death experience, for example, but then we'll come out of it and say, well, of course, if you'll believe that, you'll believe anything.
Yes.
So it's done not overt, it's done in a very, very subtle way. It's not an overt attack, it's just dismissed in some way. And that seems to be the standard way of doing it on the media.
Right.
But I would agree with you.
Time.
I had a near-death experience, but it's but I mean, it does change your life, although it does tend to lose its power a little unless you keep reminding yourself of it, of that place of absolute love and so on. But I think that what you say is true, but I think we must keep telling the stories until people do believe them, because in a funny way, it's what makes my my thinking about progress is completely wrong. They would have been much more accepted in the 12th century, or
Right.
indeed in the time of the Hebrew scriptures than they are now. So in a sense, we've lost a lot of things along the way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for carrying on telling the stories.
Thank you. And then one of the ways I try to help us all open to it is to say all this I haven't had what's officially called a near-death experience. I go, wait a minute, you've had dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Chakri has his hand up.
Thanks, Judy. So quick, this thing. I'm wondering whether for the rest of us who've not had near-death experiences, is there still a spiritual switch, so to speak? Because when I see at my own life, coming from a very religious mother who's brought us up in the spiritual traditions in India, but somehow I left it off and to pursue the science and the physics and all of that, and it seemed like when I now look back, all those work in science just took me to a point where I crashed, and then suddenly all the spiritual experiences started happening. I met a guru and the guidance and all of that. So my question for the rest of us, is there not being privy to a near-death experience, is there an equivalent like the one I stated?
Yes, in fact, that's exactly what I was starting to say is that, so thank you for that. You and June are right on. And that is, if you've had dreams, you've left your body, you're in at the beginning of it. We've all had dreams. If you've had drugs and experience out-of-body experiences, it's similar. If you've just meditated for your whole life and sometimes left your body with it, all of these are examples that mind, body, and spirit are different words for a good reason. And yes, the spirituality is something we all have access to. So I like to say, in my raised, I never experienced any of that. There was too much righteousness and control and left frontal lobe. And so I needed to get hit that hard in order to get it. Whereas if you just meditated fully in your life, like they tried to teach us in India and in other indigenous places, you wouldn't need to get hit so hard. So let me move to the second one, which was very different. Now here's an example of righteousness.
Louis?
Yes?
Just in terms of timing, we might want to shorten that about to 7 minutes instead of 10 or something like that.
I can do that. And so what happened was that I was on a river trip. Considered to be perfect, not because I almost died, I didn't, but because I went to an experience which is similar to what we do feel when we die. All right. When I now did almost die physically, but I did not go into the light. So they don't like calling that a near-death experience, like calling that a spiritually transformative experience or something. And I'm a member of IANDS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, for many years. And there was righteousness even there. So the word righteous, we all need to watch out for within ourselves and anyone else. Anyway, and this one, I was on a whitewater river trip with my two children, 15-year-old girl and 10-year-old boy, when a 100-foot tree fell off the edge of the river and landed on my head and my son's head. And the use of the guides was that my son and I were dead. Brother, my son, was drowned face down in the raft, and they picked him up and got the water out of him and brought him to life and put him in the lap of my daughter. Said he may die, but the only way he can live is if you keep talking to him and keep his eyes open. Amazing. And 2 days later, he came out of a coma. However, my left frontal lobe brain injury was so serious from the damage caused from the fractured skull and the tree on top of my head on the edge of the raft. And I have no memory of this, by the way. This is what I'm told. And they found out I had some life, and they flew me in a helicopter, put me in ICU, and I didn't come out of a coma. I didn't come out of a coma until 8 days later. And I didn't know how to read, write, walk, or talk. I didn't know who was in the room. And when I started the recovery process, which took 3 years of hospitalized brain injury recovery for me to regain 98, 99% of all this multitasking our brilliant minds and bodies are able to do, even though they expected I might be lucky to plateau at about 50%. So it was a miracle. But the biggest learning in this one, and then I needn't say any more about it, was not just all the amazing gratitude I experienced by recovering one thing after another every week. I'm talking about for 3 years going to the hospital to get this treatment. And but the big learning was in the first week when I was trying to walk on those bars. And I was feeling that there's almost nothing about the body that was working, and almost nothing about my own identity that was working as a man, as a tennis player, a father, a lover, a diversity trainer. None of that was working. I just was trying to walk and trying to talk and trying to know who that was in the room that was visiting me. And I discovered another learning. So now use the metaphor of either a tornado or a hurricane, whichever one you are most familiar with. But we all know that the center is or zero energy. All the energy spins around the core. I felt myself as if you take everything that the body and brain is able to do with the personality and all that, it's the tornado around the center, and the center is the soul. It's the core, essential being of each of us. And I experienced that even though nothing else seems to be working, yes, the lungs and heart were working on their own, etc., but none of the other muscular things were working, nor the mental. I really got, I am. Philosophers often say, get rid of the I, that's you just am. I really got it. And it's as if in the first one, I needed to learn all that I learned in the white light about our oneness in order to use spirit, mix all the skills of this left frontal lobe, MBA, who learned how to raise all the money and run the company. But now it's as if the message was, let's remove Lewis's left frontal lobe entirely and help him discover at the core, forgetting this personality that he had, the core, when you're through all the connected with the source. Whew, I still be like that as every day. And the minute I can't, anyone who loves me, my wife, my kids, or Judy would say, Lewis, get backing. So that's the second learning for all of us. Any thoughts or questions on that one before I move to the COVID ventilators? No? Okay.
We give people a minute to figure out how to unmute themselves.
Wow.
Yeah. I know
That's what a powerful way to let go of ego and even let go of body and identification with body. That's just, most of us try to do that in meditation, in imagination. You really had it happen to you physically, just losing
totally
everything and still having your essence, your soul be,
totally.
the core of who you are. It's just that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
That's what
it's hard to
that's
think that
exactly
getting, go ahead.
what I needed to remember, even though all the work I had done for all these 20 years prior to that was very wonderful and spirit driven and successful. And yes, even the skills, as I already said, the skills of the body and the mind that had made it successful, because we have to mix our skills, our doing, with our spiritual being, right? Instead of starting with the doing and forgetting the being. If we be authentic first and then use whatever skills we have to serve, that's integrity. So yes, I had done that for 20 years, but there's no question that the lesson to be learned here was to remove Lewis's left frontal lobe entirely and his personality so that he could stop doing all of this with all of that part of himself and just get the core. And I would tell you that the MRI today of the left frontal lobe is much different than it did 22 years ago when that happened. And the brain compensated for all the damage that had been done and created new pathways in order to come back to this 98, sometimes 110% recovery. And we all know what that feels like with whatever crisis we've had, where we're not enough, we're not what we used to be, but we have new learnings that only came from the crisis, learnings that we never would have had without it. So as if that wasn't enough, and my wife now says, can you please stop having these near-death experiences? I'd like you to just live until your 90s. But I needed one more, and that was in the last year and a half. This is about the first time I've been able to even be fully functional enough to do what I'm doing now with you today. Because 18 months ago, I first discovered I had cancer, right when the COVID virus was being discovered in February a year ago. I had cancer. And so I had to start intense chemotherapy and radiation to kill the cancer, which has worked. I mean, the spirit is with me again. The cancer's been killed. However, it was on this last day of chemo at the hospital that I caught the virus. And since I caught it at the same place, Kaiser, the same brilliant doctors who'd helped kill the cancer, or different, but same place, Kaiser, had to try to deal now with what they didn't yet have much experience with. And within the first 2 weeks, I hardly breathed before I even waited a week for the test to say that I was positive, and they wouldn't take me until I was positive. That's another learning. A week earlier, it would have worked better. So here I was, unable to breathe. They were giving me in intensive care all the ways to force air in to see if my destroyed lungs by this virus could possibly receive the air. And I couldn't. I was saying, no, I can't do it. I can't breathe. And they said, you have to, or we're going to put you under the ventilator. And I said, no, I'm not going under the ventilator. You see, Lewis, the controller, still hadn't learned. I'm not in control of this. I said, no, you can't put me under the ventilator. I'll die like everyone else is. And it's the last words I said. I was ventilated. And for 10 days, I have no memory, but I've seen pictures of all the tubes in every place. They try to keep the body and the lungs alive. And my wife even used a cell phone and going to FaceTime and putting earplugs in me with the help of the nurses. She watched everything and she talked to the doctors and she sang to me and played music to me and said, stay, Lewis, please stay. And I don't remember any of that, but many of us believe that's functional. And so finally, here's the near-death experience. And this time it meets their strict requirements again. In the last 2 days, when my wife was told we may be losing him, the lungs had totally collapsed and damaged again. And the second time the heart failed, and they worked on make them work enough. They're not 100% even now. And sometimes I still have to use this and find out, am I at 95 or have I dropped to 90? But I don't really need oxygen anymore. But at that time, on those 2 days when I was dying, I again was outside my body, and this is interesting to picture, but picture now a three-dimensional sphere, okay, a globe, a geodome, and all of the sections around the geodome are hexagonal. And I felt my arms and legs tied just like they were in the bed for all of us so that we wouldn't pull all these tubes out. They were tied to the four corners out of 6 of the hexagon. And there were about 12 of the rest of us up there at the same time for 24 hours. Just every second trying to live instead of die. Live, every second. And the next morning, somebody came to the bottom, put in a key, and opened the doors. All of the others, but not mine. And all the others that were up there with me went, and I'm only interpreting now. I haven't checked with the records of how many died that day, but I believe those were the ones who died. And I was left alone in this geodome for another 24 hours going, live. But I was afraid the lock had broken and I was stuck there and I didn't know why. I didn't know the others had died. I thought they were free, but they had died. And 24 hours, and instead of me going, whew, I came back into my body. And that's the time when they reduced the amount of chemicals and drugs that were making my brain unable to be conscious at all. But they maintained the number that kept me not feeling any of the pain in my body. And I started to come back slowly and talk to my wife on the phone. And I asked her, hi, where do you live? And all kinds of things that shown I wasn't back yet. But then they were worried they had taken me too soon and I had to stay in ICU for another 10 days. But that was literally August 26th, 1 year ago today, that they removed me.
Happy birthday.
That's right. That's what I said on my birthday 10 days ago. I have 2 birthdays, the original one and the new one. I'm born again for life. This was literally the day, August 26th, that I was removed from ICU and started 3 months of recovery of trying to learn how to breathe oxygen from purely out of the machine to finally, after 3 months, taking the first breath. It worked, but it doesn't work fully. I needed tanks and oxygen for another 3 months, but it's taken all this time. And it took 3 months in the bed, losing 60 pounds, not being able to even get out of bed. And I looked like a skeleton. My German wife says it looked like I was in Auschwitz. Okay? And get out of bed at all. I couldn't even lift my body. So she said, okay, but now you've lived. Can we get officially married now instead of just with rings? We gotta get married now that you're alive. And I said, no, I can't get married until I can get out of bed and walk to the toilet on my own. And I can't get married until I'm able to breathe oxygen on my own. And that took, as I said, 3 more months before I could even begin to do it. And we got married. So anyway, there's that story. Whew. Everything else is up to whatever you want to say or ask. Thank you.
Judy, it's Corrine, as you know, but I'm under a grad school classroom. Louis, well, first of all, I'm exhausted. I mean,
Yeah, so am I still.
I'm exhausted from that, and also just amazed at how many lives you've been given, and also want to know when, I mean, you gain something every time you almost died, or you did, or whatever. What are you here for? Why are you still here?
Amazing feelings up there. I must come back. I must come back. One was to be with my wife, the love of my life, for the rest of my life. And because she's younger and I need to get back into my 90s like my parents did, so that at least I'm alive for the next 20 years. But the other was, seriously, given the calling I was called to in the first one and all the work I've been doing for 40 years and all that we've learned let me rephrase that and say all that we white humans have learned in the past 2 years that is watching what's been happening, at least in this country, to Black Americans, and noticing that 90% of all the nurses who took care of me and about 50% of all the doctors weren't white. And so with no shame and no blame, how can I now take this consciousness even more deeply within myself first, because I can't teach anybody anything that I haven't learned myself, to help all of us actually really recognize that any privilege we think we have over other humans fails to value the diversity of every other human. And if we could actually all value the diversity we each bring to one another as a gift toward whatever task is at hand, whether it be I like to say from the boardroom to the bedroom, and I really mean, whether it's just in our most intimate relationship or our friends or at the grocery store or at work, if we could see the human soul and spirit in every one of us and get rid of all the natural bias. Every human has some natural tribal bias from thousands of years ago, okay? It's natural. If we can realize when that is necessary, when we're in danger, and let go of all of it without shame, just notice it and go, this is getting in my way. I need to see and value the diversity each of you bring to me, and we each bring to one another for this task at hand. Can you imagine the amazing democracy and or economy, whichever turns you on, we would have, and the world would have if we could all do that? Instead of noticing our melanin as if it's something relevant, except how we handle sun. I mean, really, that's why I came back. I have got to do more work with straight white males like myself. The rest of you have to do your own work, but I have to work on myself and my brothers to help us enhance all the human diversity as a gift. That's why I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking of the leadership we had over from 2016 to 2020, and how systemically that toxic masculinity was so visible to everyone. The results were so visible, and that the shift in consciousness. I mean, there's a real big shift that has to happen, but it's like, well, COVID is like a near-death experience for humanity.
Absolutely.
And so is climate crisis.
Yeah, which
like,
they aren't even owning yet.
die.
It's a hoax. Yeah.
Yeah. And
exactly.
So it's like, I think it is all of our work.
All of our work.
Yeah. Yeah. To join you in waking ourselves up and looking at the near-death experiences we share right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to enjoy all of us. In addition to being open more to those who don't yet get, I think it's almost more important for all of us to look with no shame and no blame at, is there any way in which I'm still not as open as I might be able to be with this person or in this situation? Because when we're able to do it, that authenticity is able to be felt by the other, and the other opens more. So instead of us wishing they would open more, if we just open more, we'll notice they will most of the time. And if they don't, and we're not safe, great. We all know how to survive and back up. But we need light and energy and spirit to fill our entire being and our whole essence and our core and our aura. And we are doing that, all of us who are choosing to be here today. And we're also, each of us, able to do our own work and stay open to our own growth, because I'm just so grateful to learn how much easier it is to not know the answer and to grow with learning than it was to think I knew the answer to everything. Oh, it's a total relief.
Yeah, your blood pressure goes down when you do that. Jennifer, you have your
Jennifer.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I am curious, Lewis, because I'm related to a whole bunch of white guys like you. And, they have not had near-death experiences. I'm just, what is the biggest resistance that you find in the white guys you're working with? And the white guys in my life fall into that realm of privilege. They're successful. They're not CEOs, but they're, high level kind of people. So what is the biggest resistance, blind spots that you have found?
My experience in myself and in them is that there's a fear of giving up the righteousness, giving up the power, and giving up the privilege, that somehow when we do so, we lose something instead of gain equity. And I really mean, I've never talked about compliance and legal responsibility or reversing past wrongs or me being charitably helpful to get rid of racism and sexism. No, it all has to start with self-interest. So the way to help them get their self-interest in equity is in and they feel if they have any experience, any wife, any daughter, terminated against or abused.
Lewis,
Yeah,
we're losing most of your words, and I wonder if you stopped your video, if we would be able to hear you better, because this is important, what you're saying. Yeah, if you maybe turn off your video and let us hear your words better.
Better now? No?
Yes, I think it is.
All right.
Yeah, I think it should be better. Thank you.
Yes. So we have to stand in the shoes of everybody and recognize that it's only in our self-interest that we really change. If we notice it's in our self-interest, we won't need to get hit so hard with the crises that had to keep breaking me, right? And all the crises we have. If we can see that it's in our self-interest, whether it's that our wife or our daughter or whatever isn't discriminated against, much less abused, and then if this friend or this employee who's Black or Native or from another country, even if they're white, if we can value whatever differences they bring that helps us achieve whatever we have as a goal. So I'm still in their self-interest, remember, if I'm in the workplace, especially in this team, but if I'm in an intimate relationship or a friendship, what common goal do we each have? And how can I enhance not only my authenticity, not my control, not my righteousness, so that the other feels safe to open and share theirs? We start to experience the gift we each bring to one another. So I'm always on the boundary between left frontal lobe MBA thinking, which is the only reason I got the MBA, so they would hear my language and trust me. But the MBA doesn't do it. So I'm always walking between the left frontal lobe words that make them feel safe in their own self-interest and the pure spirit. But if I were really trying to teach light, love, energy, and spirit, that's all. They'd wonder what I was smoking and disconnect me, right? So that's my only answer is you have to try to do the work, unfortunately, to help them get something that's in their self-interest. And, not but, and look how many books we now have out in this world that, oh no, the video's off, sorry. Anyway, there are books from Blacks and non-whites and non-Americans who are saying, hey, I'm tired of it being my work to fix you. Could you whites just please do some of your own work together and just start having difficult conversations like, wow, how do I sometimes act that way? How do I deplete somebody else's energy instead of enhance somebody else's energy? No shame, no blame. I have to say it over and over. And listen to this. In the beginning, I actually had to say it to myself and to some. All right, if I think you are 99% of the problem, and we can all prove it, can't we? And I'm only 1%. Can I own 100% responsibility for my small contribution? If I own 100% responsibility for my small contribution and still hang on to my righteousness, you're bigger of the problem, at least that's a step. And I'm not kidding when I say some of them need to start there. And eventually we all learn how to own 50%, 10, 20, 50, even 100% of what just happened. I caused the entire thing. If I hadn't said or done that, you wouldn't have reacted the way you did.
Yeah, one thing I take away from what you're saying, Lewis, from an Edgewalker perspective, is you speak the language of heart, spirit, and soul. That's your essence, that's your language. And the Edgewalking is you've used your education and your corporate experience and your diversity experience as a way to bridge, which is the lesson from your first near-death experience. You've learned to translate, to bridge as a way of helping people be in their essence, their loving, their most loving self, because that's one heart at a time. That's how the world can change.
And
Oh, I'm sorry, we're missing that.
we each are doing our own work. Yeah.
Well, it's time for us to start wrapping our conversation up today. And I'm so grateful for your friendship, Lewis, and for your willingness to share your stories and the lessons that you've learned from your stories, that and that you've come back to keep on working. Thank you for that. Thank you for, well, I guess it's like, it's silly to say thank you. You chose it, but we should probably thank Source for that, that you're still back here. So what I want to do to wrap up is just make one announcement, and then, well, actually, first I would like to say, if you want to know more about Lewis and Lewis's work, www.griggs.com is one source.
That's right. Go on. Say in the announcement. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the diversity work. There's more on YouTube if you look Lewis up on YouTube. And Lewis, where else can people learn more about you?
LinkedIn, at the professional end is LinkedIn for my name, Lewis Brown Griggs. I even have a personal coaching page on Facebook, but I don't use that much. But the YouTube, if you enjoyed this kind of experience, follow the YouTube. On her invitation here, she just put videos. But when I clicked on videos, you'll get the YouTube page, which is my page. And it has examples of my diversity work and my near-death work and my intimate relationship work. My email is lewis@griggs.com. That's easy. My first name at my last name.com if you want to connect. Or if you just want to have a private conversation on Zoom. What a great technology this is. I love doing that. So write me and ask me and let's talk.
What a generous offer. Thank you so much. And I hope that you get your cable back real soon.
He's coming at noon, at my noon today. He's coming to read the new cable. Thank you all.
My one announcement, and you see Ellis getting his guitar because he has the perfect song to close us out today. But my one announcement is that our next Edgewalker Cafe is on September 23rd, and Patricia Campanile is going to host that. Patricia, do you have anything you want to say about the Edgewalker Cafe?
I need to unmute. Hi, everybody. I was going to talk to you, Judy, but I'm thinking about possibly having Dr. Pamela Girali on, who wrote the the One for Humanity Human Blueprint for the Soul that was literally downloaded to her 20, 30 years ago. And she tried to, and now she's bringing it back out into the world. It's like time, it never went anywhere. People didn't want to hear about it. And all of a sudden it's something that came through her decades ago. And now she's ready to bring it back out. And she often will listen into these cafes. She couldn't be here today. So I'm thinking about having her on. I wanted to talk to you about that, but I think that's what I'm going to be facilitating with her.
You don't have to talk to me about that.
Okay.
Sounds wonderful.
Great.
Peggy's,
Go.
Peggy's excited.
Yeah, and that would be, what is it, Thursday? I don't have my calendar in front of me.
September 23rd.
So Thursday, September 23rd, exactly.
So we'll post that information in the newsletter and on the Edgewalker website.
Right, well, I'll get the right exact time. It's probably will be 11 or 12 Eastern time, but I'll clarify that.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ellis Ralph, who wrote this song during the time we were at guitar camp together, right after we got married at guitar camp. It has nothing to do with guitar camp or being married. Ellis, over to you.
So this song I wrote 13 years ago, and it is called The Mission. I awoke with a memory too real for a dream. After my infirmity finally totally overwhelmed me, my loved ones were troubled when I did not respond, when I could not move or speak to reassure them. I knew I was already gone. I rose up to the ceiling, looked back down to the room where my beloved companion stood next to my body in the grief and the gloom. How I wanted to tell them I could see them down there. I just gazed back in love from somewhere above, couldn't tell where. I rose up through a tunnel with a bright, flawless light at the end. Peace and joy indescribable filled me completely within. All my life in a moment I saw and knew the meaning of. The only part that was important was the love. Then I had to return here. It was not yet my time, but the mission I learned there is still clear in my mind. To enjoy and experience, to spread and to share all the joy and the peace from the pure light and love that live on over there. death is an illusion. Just a threshold we cross. Let us feel no confusion. We can never be lost. Our world too small for fighting. Our lives too short for strife. Let us look for that light. Let us reach out in love while we're living this life. Let us look for that light. Let us reach out in love while we're living this life.
Wow, Ellis, thank you so much. That says it all. Wow. And I put on the chat that in addition to the gift of near death, which is one person's story, mine, you all will appreciate the documentary called Beyond Our Sight, which says everything Ellis just said in those words. Thank you.
Thank you again, Louis. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Source, for bringing us all together to share stories and wisdom that we can go and live in our material life while we're still here. Thank you. See you next month.
Thank
if
you,
not
Judy.
sooner.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lois.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Judy. Ellis, thank you.
She's fine.
Yeah. Should we get off? Yeah. We. Oh, Marion was on it. Marion was on.
Marion.
Marion from Kauai. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Are we staying on, Judy, or no? No, it's.
I'm actually late for another workshop, but
No, that was fabulous. Thank you. So
But I-
much love, huh?
yeah, so, oh, it's wonderful.
Well,
Yeah,
we should all set up a call soon. You and Susan and I will do that.
we need to do that. It'll be
Okay.
great.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Love you.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.